Hello, my name's David Gamez. I'm going to talk to you today about video demonstrations. So I'll give a quick sort of introduction, explaining, why we need these video demonstrations. Then I'll go through the content, sort of way in which I think you should structure your video demonstrations. Then I'll go into sort of the technical details of how you record it using a desktop screen recorder. I'll give you an example of one that I've recorded to show you roughly what you should be aiming at, explain how you submit it, and then wrap it up with a quick summary. Okay, so in the modules that I teach second year this year anyway. I teach a second year course on web applications and databases, third year course on advanced web development with big data. And in both of these modules, you're developing complex web applications that have a front end, some kind of server, back end code, and some data storage. And some of you in the third year module also have all this kind of, and a lot of the back ends running in the cloud. So we've got to mark these web applications. We have to actually see them running. It's not just about submitting a load of code. We need to see that that code actually works to deliver that particular web application. Now, each staff have a lot of marking to do, and so we just don't physically have time to get each student's project working. You've got to get the server running. You maybe got to get the database running. And if the student submits the server code and the database dump or whatever, then we'd have to load up the data back into the database. It's complicated, and sometimes these things don't always work. And if we try to get each student's project running, particularly when we get to the more complex projects, we never get the marking done. There's also many cases in which the web application can't actually physically be run. So maybe the student forgot to submit the database dump. They'll lose a few marks for the dump, but that means not having the dump means we'd have to somehow reconstruct the web application by looking at the code, and it would just take way, way too long, So another reason why those web applications are difficult to mark without seeing them running is that what you're effectively writing for these things is a prototype, It's like alpha version of your software, And often there's very specific things you need to do to get it running, and very specific things you need to do to get a piece of functionality actually working, And the staff obviously aren't going to know that you need to click, the box, this way in order to be able to enter the details, or if you enter the information the wrong way, then the whole system will crash, for example. So there's lots of things the staff won't know about if they try to get the code running themselves, and that would cost you marks if the staff had to run every piece of software in order to make sure it was actually working. And even in the best case, so even if we could get all these things running, you're not going to show them to the best advantage because the staff aren't necessarily going to interact with them in the right way. They might use a different browser, who knows. So for all these reasons, it's not a viable route for the staff to try and run every single piece of code that's submitted to them. They might run some of them. I usually run some of the code that's submitted to me, but with these more complex projects, it's not possible for the staff to run all of them, So for these reasons, before this, ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, I made demonstrations a mandatory part of the assessment process. And these demonstrations, generally work very well, So the students would go through the functionality of their web application. They would show it running. They'd show how data was being stored and retrieved and all this kind of stuff. They'd explain any bits that weren't clear. And as they demonstrated this functionality, the staff would mark it. And they also ask questions, right? So if they thought the student had, copied the code off the internet, then they'd show them the code on the internet, show them their code, and they could go through it and discuss whether it was copied or not. They might raise plagiarism issues if there was similar code submitted by other students. And these demonstrations also enabled immediate feedback to be given to the students, So the staff could say, look at that, you've done a really great project, well done. Or, why did you do such a lousy job? There's obviously no effort here. What was going on? Maybe you should make some more effort next time if you want to pass the course, So demonstrations are great. They work really well, and I have no intention of relinquishing them when this pandemic has passed, But during the pandemic, we've got a bit of a problem, So even when I was doing these demonstrations live, it was quite a complicated business to work my way around 20 to 25 students within the space of 2 hours to be able to see all of the demonstrations. It was quite a challenge, And I can't see that happening over Zoom, because there's all the complications of screen sharing and, Zoom not working, connection problems, so on and so forth. I really don't think it's viable to try and do 20 to 25 demonstrations in 2 hours over Zoom, So what I'm doing is that for individual coursework on my modules, the live demonstration has been replaced by a video demonstration, okay? And that's what this video is all about, But group coursework is still going to have a live online demonstration, to show the functionality of the website, but also because in the group coursework in my second year module, it's very important to understand who did what and to listen to the grievances of the groups, about each other and come up with a single agreed contribution spreadsheet. Yeah. So we're going to keep the live online demonstration via Zoom for the group coursework, but for individual coursework and for final submissions of individual coursework, that's all we're talking about here, that we're going to have a video demonstration. So what I've explained is that we just can't mark coursework accurately without some kind of demonstration. And so I'm making video demonstrations mandatory for final submissions of individual coursework. So if it's like an first submission or intermediate submission or a proposal, you don't need to do a demonstration. But if the coursework description says do a demonstration, then that video demonstration will be mandatory. And your final submissions of individual coursework will receive 0 marks if you do not upload a video demonstration. I might add a working video demonstration, one we can actually play. Because it's part of the process, you should be able to do it. I'm expecting you to do it. Looking more broadly, if you actually end up working in technology, which I hope most of you will, you're often going to be giving technology demonstrations to managers, clients, and so on. You'll be working on like an alpha version of a new version of the website, something like that, or a new piece of functionality. And then your managers or colleagues will want to see that working. So maybe you'll go into the conference room and you'll show them this piece of technology working. Yeah, and if you work as an academic, as I do, right, then you'll be doing lots of talks and demonstrations as well as part of that work. Yeah. So, and again with clients, if you want to get a new client, you might want to show them your product and do a technology demonstration of your product. If you're trying to raise money for a startup and you've got like a beta or alpha or beta version of your product, and you want to raise more money from that, again, you're going to do a technology demonstration. So there's a certain skills demonstrations, and they're very important if you work in technology. So I think it's a very good idea for you to practice these demonstrations now and try and do a better job of them. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully you're motivated now. Now let's take a look at what I want you to put into a video demonstration for my modules. Okay. Now, what the mistake people often make is that they sort of think, oh well, I've got to make this video demonstration, and they don't really think about it very much, and they just sort of do some stuff that sort of loosely corresponds to their idea of what a video demonstration might be. Yeah, but it's not going to work. Yeah, and you're going to lose marks if you do that. Yeah. So the thing to bear in mind whenever you're doing video demonstrations is the purpose of the video. Yeah. It's not just to do it. The purpose of this video demonstration is not to do a video demonstration. Yeah. The purpose of the video demonstration is to show the teacher how your project fulfills the marking criteria. This is a successful video demonstration if the teacher understands that you've done these pieces of functionality and that they work and that they can give you the marks for them. This video demonstration fails if you do not accurately communicate what your project can do, and so the teacher does not give you accurate marks for your project, probably less marks than you should actually have. Yeah. So you've got to communicate to the teacher through the video demonstration all the functionality of your project. Yeah. So if you don't show like a particular feature working, then you can't be given credit for that, right? The video will you get credit for working code, yeah, and that's what the video demonstration is for. At most, if you don't include a feature in your video demonstration, teacher can look at the code, but they don't know if it works. Yeah, they can't run it in their heads. So at most, they can give you marks for an attempt, which is likely to be about half marks. Yeah, and just see things from our point of view a little bit. Got a lot of marking. Yeah, I mean, on my if I've run say 5 labs, it's more than 100 students. Yeah. So, there's no time for the staff to watch, half-hour, epics on a small piece of code, yeah? So if your video is too long, they're not going to watch all of it. It's just not going to happen, yeah? So I'm going to explain how you can record a nice, short 5-minute video that explains everything, and that will communicate to the teacher everything that needs to be said, yeah? So again, see things from the teacher's point of view, yeah? Or from your audience's point of view, talking more generally, yeah? The teacher already has your code in your report. So discussing your code in your report in the video demonstration is completely and absolutely pointless, yeah? You're not going to say anything that they don't know already, yeah? The video demonstration's there so that you can show the working functionality of your website, the parts that the teacher cannot see for themselves without running a web application, okay? So they don't need to run your web application to talk about code quality, talk about the attractiveness of your project, or to say what a great report it is. But but they do need to run your web application in order to be able to see the registration, login functionality, or the game, or this kind of stuff, yeah? So, think about your audience, in this case the teacher, and make sure that your video demonstration is as short as possible, yeah? Compact is better, but not too short because you need to cover all the relevant features. It needs to be clear, yeah? Don't mumble, you know, go off to get a cup of tea or something, you know, make sure the resolution's adequate, correct, but not too high resolution such that the videos are so massive, yeah? So clear as possible, short as possible, and focus on explaining to the teacher why your project should get marks for particular features, okay? That's what it's about. Now your code's gonna have bugs, okay? And we accept that. That's not an issue, yeah? And for example, maybe the password validation doesn't work unless there's an email address that's been entered, or there's all kinds of complicated bugs. We all know that, yeah? The teacher will still give you marks for functionality if it works, if even in spite of the bugs, shall we say. Yeah, if you can demonstrate that functionality working, then that's fine. Even if you know that if you click in a different sequence, the whole thing will fall over and die, yeah? So the art of a technology demonstration is to work around the bugs that you know exist because you've run this code a lot and show the product to its best advantage, yeah? And in order to do that, you need to practice it, yeah? So don't just record the demonstration straight off and hope it'll be good. It will not be good, and it will not be compact, and it will crash, and the teacher will be unimpressed and you'll get low marks, yeah? So practice your demonstration, run through it. If you've got a bug that you can sort of work your way around and still demonstrate the functionality, then work your way around it, right? That's the skill of a technology demonstration. We still check your code anyway, yeah? We might run some of your code, probably will, but this way you can at least show us the best case scenario of your project. That's the aim here, yeah? So here's my recommended structure, yeah? So introduce yourself, yeah? Just in case the video gets lost or whatever, yeah? Just say who you are, yeah? But please don't include your student email address or your ID in videos that you upload to YouTube, yeah? Because if you know the email address and ID, you can, might be able to guess the password and get into your account and all kinds of things can happen, yeah? There's no need for it, yeah? We should know who the submission's from anyway, but just to be on the safe side, to clearly state your name, yeah? Then state what you're demonstrating. Again, it's just to be on the safe side, and it makes it more professional, okay? So you say like, I'm David Gamez, and I'm going to demonstrate the final submission of Coursework 1, for CST 2120 or something like that, yeah? Yeah, it doesn't have to be exact, but just introduce yourself, yeah? And you don't have to have like fancy titles or like wipes and fades and transitions. As I'll show you in my example, pure audio introduction is totally fine. Then next, go through each marking criteria that's concerned with working functionality. So things like registration, login, game code, game, and that kind of stuff, yeah? And then show that functionality working, yeah? This is your justification to the marker about why you should achieve a particular mark, yeah? So register a user, show that the data is stored in local storage. So don't just register it and don't show the data being stored, because maybe that bit doesn't actually work, yeah? If you want the marks for data storage, you have to show the database or local storage or something like that, yeah? So go through the marking criteria when you're planning a demonstration, and then demonstrate the appropriate parts. And you can even, I've seen some very good demonstrations where people go through each marking criteria on the coursework description, then they go and demonstrate that piece, and then they go back to the marking criteria. That's a very good way to structure it, yeah? And I'll give you an example later in the talk. Now don't, try and argue that you should get like 10 marks for this wonderful looking front end, or that, man, my complexity is so high, it breaks the ceiling, yeah? The teachers will make their own minds up about what you've got, yeah? Your job is to show them what you've got, so you can say, this is the complexity of my project, and, here's this and this and this, and they'll look at your code, and they'll look at what you're showing them, and they'll make a decision about whether it is that, yeah? Don't try and argue for certain marks, because we're just going to ignore your arguments, yeah? So do not discuss code. Do not discuss the attractiveness of the front end. That's something the teacher can make their own mind up about. Don't talk about the report. We'll read the report if it's there. If it's not there, you're going to get no marks for it, yeah? Don't make excuses. We don't care about excuses. Show what you've got as accurately as you can, and that's the way you're going to get a good mark, not by saying, give me 10 marks, please, 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 I'm feeling sad today, or something like that, yeah? Right, length of video demonstration is very important. Now, certainly for second year modules, I'm confident you can demonstrate everything in 5 minutes, yeah? With third year modules where you've got a bit more complexity, you might need a little bit longer, but certainly less than 10 minutes, yeah? This is plenty of time if you practice your demonstration first, because if you practice your demonstration first, you'll know what works and what doesn't, and you'll be able to show the working functionality very precisely. Yeah, if you don't practice it, and then something goes wrong, and then you have to restart the server, or you forget the database is running and all blah, 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 you're just going to go way beyond the 5 minutes. And I've seen some terrible submissions this year. They're like, you know, massive video size, 20 minutes long, haven't watched all of it, and so it was all a complete waste of time for everyone, yeah? So I've said to the people working on my modules, I will say to them, that you don't need to spend more than 5 minutes watching any particular video. So it's your job to get your demonstration within that limits. Yeah, we can watch 6 maybe, but we're certainly not going to watch more than 10. Yeah. And longer videos are going to create more problems for you because you're going to have to mess around uploading to YouTube because the file size is going to be bigger. Yeah. So just don't bother trying to make them 20 minutes because we're not going to watch them. So as I'm emphasized already, but I'll emphasize it again, you must practice your demonstration before recording it. Whenever I'm recording an online lecture like this, I always run through it once with the slides in my head, and then I actually talk through it to make sure the timing's right, to make sure that what I'm saying actually makes some kind of sense. Yeah, you got to do the same thing. Just run through your demonstration, speaking it out, make sure it's roughly 5 minutes, then record it. Yeah. As I said, you know, I'm not going to sit there and watch demonstrations where people, you know, turn the database on and mess around with tables. Practice it, and then it'll look professional, yeah? It'll help you keep it in time limit, and obviously watch it before submitting it. If you just record it, maybe, and then submit it, maybe you just recorded a blank screen or something, yeah? Maybe the video encoding didn't work or something like that, yeah? So you obviously got to watch it and check it. Don't bother editing it. I'm fine with people launching up OBS Studio and, you know, pressing record. That's okay. But you don't need to do fancy stuff, but you do need to make sure watch it before you record it, yeah? So obviously, since this is a mandatory part of the assessment process, don't try and record your video demonstration 5 minutes before the deadline, yeah? Because you've got to practice it, you've got to go through it, got to get it all running. Do it the day before, yeah? You know, if necessary, you know, leave some other bits that are not relevant to the video demonstration for finishing off like closer to the deadline, yeah? So record it the day before, and then maybe just before the deadline you can tidy up your code or something like that, yeah? So don't leave it as, it's a very important part of your submission, so don't just ignore it and leave it for the last minute, yeah? Okay, so that's the contents. Let's go on to how you actually do it with the technology. So video demonstrations should be recorded with a desktop screen recorder. So don't just point your phone at the screen and sort of wave it about and hope it'll give you a good demonstration and clearly communicate what you need to communicate, because it won't. Also, recording it on your phone is harder. It's much, much easier just using a desktop screen recorder. So what that does, it just captures your screen as a video, and it captures the audio that's going through the computer and saves them on a video file. It's dead easy, yeah? And for doing this, I strongly recommend use OBS Studio, yeah? It's free, it's very stable, which is important for this. It's flexible, you can configure it in all kinds of different ways. And, you know, it works on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, yeah? It's you know, pretty general. It's really good, and I use it for all my lectures. So, you know, if you want to use some weird freeware thing that probably, you know, encrypt your hard drive and charge you thousands of pounds to unlock it, you know, go ahead and do that, yeah? But obviously I don't recommend that, yeah? I recommend that you use OBS Studio because I know it's good and I know it'll work for you. Now, as I said, you need to be able to, you don't want your video file size to be too big, or you're going to have problems submitting it, yeah? And the size of a video file is a combination of 2 factors. So obviously the number of pixels that are recorded for each frame, so you have like 25, 30 frames a second, whatever it is. And so for each frame, you're having, you know, a number of pixels wide, a number of pixels high. So the number of pixels will contribute to the size of the video substantially. And also the bit rate. And this is how much compression goes on in the video. So if you have a large amount of compression, then the video will start to look a bit strange, and you'll get sort of, you know, weird smudgy effects and this kind of stuff. Whereas a low compression, it's sort of inverse, right? Will mean high compression will have small file sizes, but it could look rubbish. Low compression will be large file sizes, but it'll look good. Yeah, and you need to find a balance between the two. Yeah, and bitrate is how many bits per second is used to send the video file, and so there'll be compression within an image, like probably some kind of JPEG type thing, and it's got kind of clever compression between frames to reduce the bitrate as well. Yeah. So looking at OBS Studios, what I use is resolution about 1280 by 1024. And what I do is I set the screen resolution on my desktop to that resolution, because then I can see exactly what's being recorded. But you can also scale down. If you've got a large high resolution screen, you can, in OBS Studio, let you scale it down, but just watch out for that, because if you've got small things on a high resolution screen, it scales it down, they might be illegible when they get to when they're actually recorded. Yeah. So if you use these settings, like roughly that sort of resolution, then you should have good quality and a reasonable file size. I'll show you some of the exact settings in a little bit. So I got 20 megabytes for 5 minutes, yeah, which is good, yeah. That gives you plenty of space to do the code and report and still get it under 100 megabytes, yeah. Now this is very important, right? Again, remember who your audience is. Your audience are the staff who are marking your projects, yeah? And so obviously the staff who are marking your projects need to be able to see the video, right? Otherwise it's all a bit of a waste of time, right? So if you record your video in some weird flash format that requires a specialist player, then you're not going to get any marks for it, yeah? So the requirement is that your video demonstration must be playable on the VLC player. The VLC player is free and it supports a whole load of different video formats. It's very flexible. But you must be able to play it on that player, not on some weird special player that I've got to download from somewhere else. Yeah. So if you don't, if the staff member downloads the video, tries to play it on VLC, and it doesn't play, you're going to get no marks. So make sure it's either use a very standard format like MP4, or make sure it's playable on the VLC player. So I strongly recommend you use MP4. Yeah, MP4 is playable everywhere. It's a very very widely used format, and you can't go wrong with it, really. Yeah, if you use some other weird format, you know, you're at risk of getting 0 marks for your final submission. So as I said, what I do to reduce my video size to manageable portions is I reduce the screen resolution, because I've got a desktop that's like 2,500 pixels wide, and then I reduce it down to like 1,000 pixels wide, and then I can see exactly what I'm recording at the resolution I'm recording at. Yeah. As I said, and to do that, so that's one way to do it, to reduce your file size. The other way to do it is you can just scale it down in OBS Studio. But do check your video if you do this, because as I said, you could end up with small text being absolutely illegible, yeah? So on Windows, if you want to change the resolution, I'm sure you know how to do that anyway. Just right-click, select Display Settings, and then you can change it to what you like. And as I said, I tend to use 1280 by 1024 for my videos. So you might want to scale your screen resolution down. And then next step after you've installed OBS Studio is you then need to configure the sources. You need to tell OBS Studio what it's going to record from, yeah? So right click in the sources pane, we do add display capture, and then we can configure it to record from your display, your monitor or laptop screen, that kind of stuff. And then we right click on sources and do add audio input capture, and then we can configure the audio input source. Can't do a demo because I'm recording this thing live, right? But you know, I can show you the screenshots. Yeah, so here we got the sources pane in OBS Studio. Just right click on it, add, and then we do display capture, and then that lets us configure our display to be able to record from it. And you can see now it's actually recording from the display. And then if we right click here and do add audio input capture, then I can configure if I've got several microphones, I can configure which one I want to record from. And then in OBS Studio, you'll see sliders and the sort of, you know, the monitors audio levels. So make sure your audio levels aren't clipping, so you've got hideously distorted audio, that kind of stuff, yeah? So we set it up to record the audio and from the desktop display, in my case, because I'm using a desktop. Then we need to configure where the video is going to be stored, because obviously you need to be able to upload it. The resolution of the video, maybe, the video quality, bitrate, and the video format. So if we click on settings, you get this kind of settings menu, dialog, whatever. Then we click on video here. We can then choose to scale the video down if we like. So if we suppose we had a screen that was not 1920 by 1080, we could then scale it down to 1280 by 720, and the OBS Studio will do that scaling for you. But as I said, personally I prefer to change the screen resolution, but you can do it that way if you prefer. Then this is the most important screen, output. So this seemed, in my system anyway, this is set automatically, so you can leave that as 2,500 kilobytes per second. But for the recording, you need to sort of set this up correctly. So obviously make sure you set a path to somewhere sensible so that you can find it. Then I recommend you choose recording quality, high quality, medium file size. Yeah, you don't want it so kind of blocky and nasty that the teacher can't see it. Yeah, but equally you don't want a huge file size either. And this seems to be a nice sort of balance between quality and file size. Yeah, and I strongly recommend use MP4 file format. Yeah. Then once you've set everything up, we've got the sources, we've got the settings set correctly, then we click on start recording to record your video. As I said, do a quick test run. I always do that before I record a lecture to make sure the sound's audible and that the video looks okay. Otherwise, you're just spending a lot of time recording something that thinking you're recording and actually not recording anything. It's just a waste of time. Yeah. So when you've done a little test run, you've practiced your demonstration, then you're ready to actually record it. Okay. So separately from this recording, I did like an example video demonstration, and this was in this case it was for the first piece of the final submission of Coursework 1, the kind of game website. So this is just an example showing you how to do a video demonstration, but the same principles apply to all video demonstrations. So just take, if you're recording a demonstration for a different bit of coursework, just generalize, you know, what I was showing this video. Yeah. So I'll show this video, and then I'll come back to this, you know, this particular talk. Yep. Hello, my name is David Gamez. I'm going to be giving a demonstration of the final submission of Coursework 1 today, and this is my maths game with rankings. So I'm going to start the demonstration on the home page. As you can see, this is index.html, which has the game, and then we got multiple pages here: login, register, rankings, admin. So I'm going to start my demonstration with registration. So here I've got the developer tools open showing the local storage. At the moment there's nothing in there. So if initially I try to register with no information, click submit, then I've got some validation that checks that the registration form contains missing fields. And so now if I put some details, so I don't know, put Joe or something like that, and maybe a password, 12, it doesn't have any kind of complex validation. So if I click Joe 12 and submit, then you can see it's created a sort of data structure here in JSON format containing the username and the password for Joe. So Joe's registered successfully. I'm just going to register another user so I can sort of show you the rankings table. So here we've got another user called Susan. Same password, doesn't really matter. So here I've got two users, Joe and Susan. So now I'm going to show you the login functionality. So let's start with a user that doesn't exist, like Jack. With some, you know, random password, and then so I've got some checks here that's checking to see if the username exists. And so now if I put Joe in with still the incorrect password, then it's checking that tells me that the password's not recognized. And then if I put Joe with 12 and submit it, then it logs me in, and you can see here I'm storing the logged in state in local storage. So next stage then is to actually play the game. Now I've got a logged in user, because then I can do the rankings. So I'm just going to answer some of these questions, some correct, some wrong, so we can get some different scores. 8 plus 5, 13, 2 plus 1, I think I managed that, 3, and then 4 plus 9, just put something wrong in. Okay, so I got 2 out of 4 correct. So you can see now if I go to the rankings page, so that's my game, right? It's not very sophisticated, but I think I should, you know, it counts for at least the 5 marks. Then if we look at the rankings page here, we've got Susan at 0 and Joe at 2, got both registered users. And now if we log out and log in as Susan, I've shown you the demo stuff, the validation stuff already. So now I'm logged in as Susan. We play the game. 8 plus 9, 17, perhaps a little better. 6, 8 plus 4 is 12, and 2 plus 1 is 3. So now play the game. Susan's played the game now. It's a logged in user. And now we can see that it's stored the score successfully for both Susan and for Joe. If you look here, it's stored it in JSON format. Here's the score stored for Joe, and here's the score stored for Susan. And it's actually displaying that on the rankings table as well. So we quickly look at the criteria. What I've demonstrated here is I've shown you the game, and I haven't shown you a complex game. What else got? Yeah, that's all early submission. And then I've shown you the storage of basic data. There wasn't any additional data in my website. I've shown you the limited validation for empty fields here, and I've showed you the login with appropriate error messages, and I've showed you how both Joe's and Susan's scores are stored in JSON format in HTML local storage, and I've also shown you a rankings page as well. Yep. So that's all the functionality of my website, and that's the end of my demonstration. Okay, so you should have seen the demonstration video. I think it came to about 20 megabytes. 20 megabytes? Yeah, something like that. Yeah, a bit less, in fact. So it was pretty. So it's the right sort of length, and hopefully it gives you some idea about what you should be putting in terms of content. Okay, last part of this talk, I just want to very briefly talk about how you submit this thing. Yeah, so the maximum size for submission of my learning is 100 megabytes. Yeah, and this year, to make the marking easier, we're asking you to submit a single zip file rather than having multiple tabs, which some of you have done in previous years. Yeah. So you need to have a single zip file with everything in it, and that single zip file needs to be less than 100 megabytes, yeah? So if the total file size of code, report, video demonstration, database dump, and so on is less than 100 megabytes, just zip up the video with the rest of the submission, upload it, easy peasy, yeah? And that's what you should be aiming at anyway, because if you use the right encoding, the right settings, and it's only 5 minutes, it should easily be less than 100 megabytes. And obviously, if you're doing a piece of coursework using Node.js, get rid of the Node modules file. If you're doing a Java piece of coursework, get rid of the Jar files. You don't need to submit any third-party libraries because we can always download them if you want to run new code, yeah? And that's good. If you submit Node modules or Jar files, that's going to push up the size of your submission and potentially, make it more difficult to include the video, yeah? If for some reason, you can't figure out, how to get the settings right, whatever, you've ended up with a 100 megabyte video or more, then you have to upload it to YouTube. And in that case, just put a link to the video in your project report. And that's completely fine, as long as you leave it up there for long enough so we can mark it. As long as it's there and the link's in the report, that's totally fine too. So that's a sort of backup measure if for some reason you end up in a situation where you've got a video or you've got a submission more than 100 megabytes. It shouldn't end up like that, but it could happen. Okay, so I've explained, I've given you the reasons why we need video demonstrations and why I've made them mandatory for final submissions of individual coursework. You don't submit a video demonstration, you don't get a mark. You don't submit a playable video submission, you don't get a mark, okay? So that's why I've done this short talk here, right, to explain how you can actually record these video demonstrations in a correct way with the right structure, the right file size, the right encoding, and so on and so forth. And more generally, technology demonstrations are a useful skill. Yeah, it's something you need to be able to do well, because that's going to get your startup, more money. It's going to get you a promotion if you do a good demonstration for your manager. It's going to get you more clients for your company. Yeah, it's an important part of working in technology to be able to demonstrate that technology to other people. So it's a good time now to get to grips with it and improve your skills. And that's it.